Big game Black Friday. Hope you're stuffed. I hope you're ready for a lot of basketball. Welcome to Talk Illini on Orange and Blue News, sponsored by the On3 Network. My name is Sonny Verma. My guest today is Mark Zanetto. Good friend Mark. We are going to talk the showdown in Madison Square Garden between the Fighting Illini and the UConn Huskies. Now, Mark, actually, before we start talking, why don't you let the folks know where they can find your work?
No, I appreciate you, man. Thanks for having me on. Yeah, we have if you are a Big East or just a basketball fan in general, we have created a channel called the Big East Energy Network. It's the only place you can get Big East basketball news 365 days a year. We don't sleep. We have every team covered. We have 14 different shows, my UConn show, men's and women's. So we cover it all. And we dabble in the one football program that's doing well in the post Big East football world, the UConn Huskies. And we'll talk about it in a minute.
So I have a funny story with Mark, actually, and he doesn't know I'm going to tell this story. I met Mark, met in the internet sense 2 years ago. It was the week of the Elite Eight game. Now, Mark was covering UConn. I'm covering Illinois, of course, and so I always like to do these sort of game previews. And I bring on Mark for maybe a half-hour interview, and I remember being done with it and texting in my group chat that this guy was pompous. This guy was arrogant. He did not give us a single chance to win this basketball game. Doesn't he know we've got Terrence Shannon Jr. on this team? Is he not aware that Terrence was the second best player in the country that year? And then, sure enough, the Elite Eight game happens, and Mark was right. It was such an embarrassing performance by Illinois. But you know what?
I'm wearing my shirt. I'm wearing my 23, 24.
I didn't even notice that. Yeah, I'm going to have to blur that out once I air this. No, it was one of those where it was a humbling, certainly, and Illinois is a program that's prone lately to getting memed. And I think, the 30-0 run is certainly one of those benchmark moments in recent memory that Illinois fans, or at least detractors, like to bring up. And there's a lot of, redemption angles Friday for Illinois. Well, first you talk about that UConn game, of course, just the 30-0 run, but then also Madison Square Garden. Last year, Illinois got walloped by Duke in a game that they weren't really at all competitive in. So we'll see how things go. But, I will say before we jump to the actual game itself, as embarrassing as that game was in the Elite Eight 2 years ago, I think it was a turning point for Brad Underwood. That offseason, he literally did say that, you know what, seeing UConn up close and personal, I saw what a championship team looks like. I saw that, I'm going to need better players, bigger size. And that's something he's focused on in the last 2 years. Last year, we had, I think, the second biggest team in the country. This year, we're right up there as well. So, unfortunately, it had to happen that way. But in the long run, I do think it could be a turning point for where Illinois is headed in the future in regards to the roster construction. So I guess in a way, thank you for embarrassing us and going on that 30-0 run, Mark.
Yeah, no, and I it's so funny when you messaged me earlier and said, "Hey, do you want to do a preview?" I said, "Of course." And then I thought about that in first interaction myself, because I'll be honest with you, man, like it was during that year in particular, because that was the first part of me doing full-time coverage of the UConn men and the women, and they were so good that year that it was hard to go into any of these, these kind of crossover events, if you will, and be like, well, I don't know. We'll see what happens. It just was like, it was hard to be, I guess down the middle when you're watching a team that, I know in conference, games can be difficult no matter who you play. A Xavier team that Sean Miller said, we beat them by 42 in the Civic Center on like a Sunday afternoon. And he was just like, we kind of all thought about quitting. Like he said that in the press conference. Like this team made teams that were otherwise really talented look pedestrian. And so this team that you were going to play on Friday, that it's not like that. It may end up someday, maybe 3 months from now, but this is not the same 23-24 UConn team. The construction of the roster is a little different, and let's dive into it, man. Like I am interested in the in a couple different matchups. For me, I and I'm going to say his name wrong, so check me on this.
Everyone does. It's okay. Which one are you talking about? It could be like one.
There's a few. There's a few.
Yeah.
You know, the Ivišić brothers. Those are easier names, but the Humrichous or something like that. What's his name? Humrichous. Okay. Yeah. I think his maturation, even just from the start of the season, I've watched a few different games from Illinois just to prepare for this game, but also just because I'm a hoops sicko. I was up to 2:30 watching, the Players Era last night. So I think for me, like Humrichous presents a matchup issue for UConn, and really anybody at 6'9", shooting guard. You can put him on the wing. He's a good player. He's not like skinny like the Ivišić is. He's kind of got some meat on him. So I like that, and I also think from the perspective of the point guard play, you guys have a smaller point guard in Kylan, but he's also built like a linebacker.
Sure.
And so like I'm curious more about the guards than I am more internally, and we're not sure about Terrace Reed yet. We'll know probably game time whether or not he's playing, and that's a huge issue. But my thing is, since you guys don't have like what Arizona had with having a 7'2", 6'9", 270-pound guy, I don't think the loss of Terrace is as big, but I do think the matchups of the guards and the wings is really kind of what's going to make or break this game.
Yeah, I mean, I like that. For me, Ben Humrichous is a favorite target of Illini fans because he came in with so much hype last year. You had, John Fanta call him the next Dalton Connect. You had Brad Underwood saying he's the best shooter that he's ever had. And, by all measures, Ben was somewhat of a disappointment last year. This year, he's kind of settled into his role, which is like maybe the seventh guy on the team. But you're absolutely right. When it comes to post men, he's the best defender that we have. He's the best big man perimeter defender we have. And I'm glad you brought that up. And that's how I know you do know ball. He was also one of my keys for victory on Friday. The only issue with Ben is sometimes I'm afraid that he's not up to the moment, and a big experience in Madison Square Garden against a primetime opponent like that. He's one of those guys that if his first 1 or 2 3-pointers don't fall, I could see him being hesitant to keep shooting later on. And I think that's going to be, something that we have to keep an eye out on. As we're talking about Reed, because I was going to ask you about the injury status on those guys. You guys are somewhat, there's 2 guys, obviously, that it's game time decisions. Illinois is finally, for the first time, becoming healthy. And all the guys who are expected to play are going to play. Unfortunately, pretty much all season long, our best player, Tomislav Ivišić, he played game 1. He hurt himself after that. And he's just been a shell of himself since he's come back. If he were back, if I saw him last Monday evening look like 80% of what Ivišić looked like last year, a guy who could be potentially all Big Ten, I'd feel a lot more confident about Friday's game. But at this point, I think I'm a lot more comfortable splitting it up between Tommy and Big Z. They both, they complement each other so well. In the sense that not only are they, brothers, but, one is a shot blocking guy who likes to stay in the middle but shoot 3-pointers, whereas Tomislav Ivišić is like an engine. He's the engine that runs this offense when it's at its peak. You can give him the ball at the high post, and he's going to make magic happen. The fact that we're not going to get 100% on Tommy is what kind of makes me a little more hesitant going into this matchup on Friday. But yeah, Kylan Boswell is another guy. But Kylan, this season, this season against lower level competition, it seems he's kind of like mentally checked out. And those are my words. Nothing I've heard. It's just my own eye test and eye observations. But in our biggest games against Texas Tech, against Alabama, Kylan was one of our 2 best players in each one of those games. And Kylan, sure enough, had a very disappointing effort. I gave him my lowest player grade of the season on Monday evening against Texas Rio Grande Valley. But then we have this game coming up against UConn. And so Kylan, I think, is going to have to be one of the main guys to step up because UConn, and I don't know what Brad Underwood's strategy for this game is going to be, but I really feel like Dan Hurley is going to try to force as many switches as possible when it comes to this Illinois defense because we're not athletic. And the tape came out from that Alabama game. Texas Rio Grande Valley, that's all they did to start the game on Monday, and we act like we'd never seen it before. Now, they acknowledged in the scouting report they knew it was going to happen. They practiced against it, and yet a team like the Vaqueros could score on Illinois. I feel like Dan Hurley's salivating at that idea.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think UConn presents a bunch of matchup nightmares for them. However, this offense, I'm not being as arrogant as I was the first time. This team is just not hitting on all cylinders. Now, that could go one of two ways. We had a bye game similar to yours. We played a Bryant team that is probably going to win the America East. One of the outside of the Power Four, they're the tallest team in the mid majors. Like they had 6'8" shooting guards, 6'10" wings, so they're a longer team. So I don't know if there was like a malaise and just kind of like not really. But Sunday is 6:00, also a really weird start. So like the crowd wasn't into it. You could just tell. Like I have people that go to games for me now and take pictures, and it just was not a typical UConn home game. They were a 36.5 point favorite. They like slogged their way to I think like a 20-point win or something like that. And it is very similar to what I think it was a 17-point win for you guys against Texas Rio Grande. And so my biggest thing is they shot 28% from three. Solo ball is shooting 20% from three this year. Silas Demary Jr. is doing wonders for them from a leadership perspective. Had a triple double in that game, but he needs his teammates to meet him halfway. Dan said in his press conference, we had a triple double, and last time we had a guy doing triple doubles, it turned out pretty well, and that was Tristan Newton. He's like, however, that could have been 17 points, 14 assists, and 10 rebounds because nobody hit any shots. And so without a guy like Terrace that you can dump it down low and kind of let him eat and create second chance opportunities, it's been kind of feast or famine. We've seen what this team can do in very short samples against the BYU team that has looked a lot better since they lost to UConn. They were up 20 points with Terrace, even without Braylon Mullins, just everyone hitting on all cylinders. Terrace is I knew he was a great transfer. I was on him from the jump. It was a perfect fit for UConn, an Adama Sanogo clone, but bigger, like a 2 inches, about 40 pounds of more of a person than what Adama is. And if anyone could get that guy's footwork out of him, I knew Dan and his staff could get it done. He's looked like an All-American when he's been healthy. He's literally just like a vacuum. He gets every rebound. He creates space. He doesn't miss too many, buckets down low. He's showing that he can actually shoot from distance if they need it. And so I say all that to say, I think he's 50-50 for Friday. Mm-hmm. I think his ankle was a little, he probably could have played if it was a bigger game against Bryant, but they didn't want to do that. I don't know if they throw him into the fire. Maybe they do. But I do think, and I'm not trying to break any news here, but I do think that Mullins Mania is going to hit Madison Square Garden at least for 10, 15 minutes on Friday afternoon, on Black Friday, because and go buy your Mullins Mania shirts on BigEastEnergy.com. All proceeds go to the Connecticut Boys and Girls Club. So that's a great cause. But no, I'm being serious. Like it's trending in the right direction. He's practiced. All the internet sleuths, whenever they show pictures, you see Braylon in the background, shooting shots. There was actually a great picture of him. I guess they do a drill where like when you end it, the other team like runs a ton. And so you could see Eric Ryba and Jacob Furphy just like their faces just dropped because he's shooting a shot and they could just tell that it was buckets. And Andre Jackson was visiting from the Bucks and he was in the background like, this is the dude. So like, Braylon can solve a lot of problems from the perimeter, but Terrace is the engine. You mentioned that for your guy. If they get Terrace back, they're a top 5 team in the country. If they don't get Terrace back, they're a maybe second weekend team, can beat some folks, can maybe surprise Illinois on Friday without a Terrace. But as you saw in the Arizona game, it's tough sledding.
So let me ask you about that Arizona game. I don't mean to be so simple, but what happened? What did Arizona do to come out victorious in that game?
Well, if you're the bigger Ivišić brother could be the guy that like Arizona had with Krivac, who's like 7'2", 260. That's what they did. They essentially played Creighton Kalkbrenner defense, which is they put a 7'2", 230-pound guy in the middle, and essentially tried to funnel and switch everything so that UConn funneled everything to him. Okay. And they missed a lot of easy bunnies. They missed a lot of easy shots. So my thing is like that team, Arizona played that almost to perfection without Terrace in there. You can't do that when Terrace is in there because they put you in all these conflicting situations where you put on these DHOs where maybe Terrace is rolling to the basket, maybe he's flaring out, and then there's more action behind you. So without Terrace, the offense runs slower, if that's even possible, because they're on like a 350 out of 365, like that's their pace of play. So like my thing is like there's not an ability to get that bulletproof basketball of, okay, we can get bucket shots at the rim, we can also get open threes. You're relying too much on the 3-point shot and even the mid-range game, which they typically don't like to do.
So, I know we got to wrap things up shortly. Can you give at least the Illini crowd watching this show maybe a 30 to 45-second scouting report on what the UConn offense looks like and what the UConn defense kind of llooks like?
Yeah, defense is I'll start there. It's still a work in progress. We still block a lot of shots. Eric Ryba, our 7'1" freshman power forward center, has been surprisingly good as a rim protector without Terrace in. He's also shooting the three pretty well. So I think they switch everything. A lot of 6'6" to 6'8" guys. Silas at the point guard is 6'5". The only guy that on our team, or two guys on our team that play that are a little undersized, are two backup point guards: Malachi Smith, Alec Melander. You won't see Melander unless we're getting beat by a lot. And so I think the defense is pretty solid. Solo ball still a little bit of liability, kind of like Peja's kid, Stojakovic. They kind of mirror each other. Great shooters, defense optional. And then on offense, I think, it's the same team you saw that had that 30-0 run. The players are different. Yeah. So be ready for a lot of action, a lot of screens, a lot of slips, a lot of dribble handoff, and a lot of UConn doesn't run. The wild thing is like this isn't Alabama. We don't get up and down the floor. They get a rebound. If they see a transition, they go. But for the most part, they put it in a point guard's hand or a shooting guard's hand, and they dribble it up and they set up their offense. So it's beautifully boring when it's done well. But it can be kind of almost like a root canal when it's not going well, like last year.
And what I do like is both of these head coaches aren't afraid of competition. This game in Madison Square Garden, Brad Underwood, it takes a lot of balls to do that. It's what do you guys call it? It's South.
I give Brad Underwood credit for, I'm not the biggest Brad Underwood fan, but to your point, I think he has learned from past mistakes and being stubborn about things. You have to evolve in this game. It's changing all the time. Hell, they're playing a tournament, this will already air where the winning team gets like $1 million. Yeah. So like the world is changing. So you kind of have to flow with it. I give Dan a ton of credit for being he's mellowed a little bit. So if your Illini fans are looking for an explosion of emotion, you probably won't get that. Even Jeff Goodman complimented him on being nicer to officials this year in a recent interview. So Dan has softened a little bit, probably because his team's better. But I think he's also realized that like coaching angry isn't his best option. Coaching with passion is his best superpower, but coaching angry is not.
Let's wrap things up a little bit talking about Dan. I think it was just this offseason, right? He talked about, I don't know if it was in a book or something. I remember reading about it, that he was even considering walking away from coaching. Mm-hmm. Now, I'll be honest, I read that. I'm like, yeah, right. A guy with that sort of competitive fire in him, he needs to compete in some sort of way. Do you think it was just one of those where he for momentarily just got burnt out? Or do you think, he may not end up being around for the next 10, 15 years?
No, I think I'll give you an example. I was asked that question by Aaron Torres because we essentially talked about that. And the one thing I will say is that I think it's a little bit of both. Like, I think he was probably thinking about contingency plans. Like, you and I do this for a living, right? If something started to go wrong and you could see the writing on the wall, even though you want to do this all the time, you don't think you call your friend in another industry that maybe you used to have a contact in and be like, hey, man, if I quit, do I have a job? I just think that's what it was. Like, he has friends everywhere, friends in the city, friends in New Jersey that all work in media, NBC, Peacock, the whole thing, and just probably said, hey, man, what do you think about me being an analyst? And they were probably like, dude, come on, man, you're a coach. Like,
right.
Don't pull a Bruce Pearl, right? You know what I mean? Like, that's probably what the conversation. And the same thing goes with people that read the book and they thought, well, dude, what are you talking about? Like, it takes so much to like rent to sell your house. It was talk. Like, when they thought they were going to go to the Lakers,
right?
Him and his wife basically just started making a list. What do we have to do? We have to sell the house. They want to buy a house in New Jersey, so they're close to the family, like at the beach. Like, all of that was like listed. But then he realized he wasn't going to go. It didn't mean that like he did all of it. He didn't put his house up. There wasn't anything on Zillow. Everyone relax. So like, to me, he's a guy that I think is like a lot of us, where you're trying to figure out what's the next thing.
Sure.
And I don't think he'll ever leave coaching altogether. You're right. He's got too much fire. But then there's also the other part of it. If you get into media, there's this business is competitive as all hell.
That's true.
So if you're the best analyst in, like, look at A-Rod, one of the best baseball players of all time, screwed up his entire life, blah, blah, blah. But now he's literally the lead analyst on Fox. Tom Brady. There's competition everywhere. So I would never discount it if that's what he wants to do. But I think his true passion is obviously coaching and developing kids.
All right. One more thing. We're talking about a coach who thought about leaving to a coach that actually is leaving. The news broke on Tuesday evening that Jim Mora Jr. was going to leave the UConn football program. Any quick thoughts on that?
For my first thought was that because it was late, I was putting my son to bed, and I came back out. And my wife said, "Did you see what I sent you?" And it was Jim Mora leaving, because she's a huge football gal. And I was like, "Oh man!" But then I was like, "Colorado State."
Right.
That's the first thing that popped into my head is like, listen, Jim Mora has done wonders at UConn. Amazing. Back-to-back 9-win seasons. Got a guy in the Blitnikoff Award finalist in Skylar Bell. A guy who probably should be there for the Heisman, and Joe Fayano, who's only thrown one interception off a deflection. An incredible dream season. The only losses this year are in overtime. If this was a hockey season, we'd be 9-0-3. So this team has played so well. We basically should be in the ACC championship game because we're better than pretty much everybody in the ACC. So like, my thing is like, it sucks that it's Colorado State, but what it signifies is regardless of UConn's status as an independent, if they do get a P4 invite, even if they get one tomorrow, no one's going anywhere until the new media rights deals happen in 2030, 2031. So he probably was like, this is my last chance to go play in a Power 4 conference, because he's 64 years old. Yeah. He's no spring chicken. So I think that's what the adults are talking about. People are still going to be pissed. But for the most part, I've seen all positive stuff online. But same thoughts, like Colorado State, really?
Yeah, I'm not gonna lie. I kind of echoed those thoughts. All right, so Friday, 11:30 Central, Madison Square Garden, Fighting Illini against UConn Huskies. Mark, I've texted you this privately before. I'm extremely proud of all the work that you've done. And again, let the folks know one more time where they can find your work.
Appreciate you. As always, Sonny, thank you. The website is bigenergymediapods.com. The channel is Big East Energy Network. You can find that on YouTube. You can find, if you type in Big East Energy Network for Apple or Spotify, you will see a roster of shows. I can't wait. I'm going to give you a inside scoop here. I'm literally wearing my Seton Hall home field shirt right now because we're Hall in, baby. They should be playing for the Maui championship. So like, for me, the Big East is the most unique conference in the country. No football, basketball is king. That was echoed at Media Day. And so we've tried to echo that with our coverage. And it has looked a little choppy at the beginning with some of the traditional powers losing, but you're starting to see some, the bottom is starting to, get to the top. And I think we're going to have a much more competitive, every team's in the top 100 in Ken Palm. So the thoughts of the death of the Big East are grossly exaggerated.
All right, Mark, good luck on Friday.
You too, brother.